Hello and welcome to the Defence Monthly show, and of course it's the last one of the year. December has been quite fantastic, hasn't it? I'm Alan Peaford.
And I'm Jon Lake.
So John, what's been buzzing for you this month?
Well, the obvious one is this massive and historic order for 80 Rafales from the UAE, which secures Dassault's production line for a decade to come. Brilliant news for them, certainly.
Well, we're going to come on to that one because I was amazed it wasn't produced at the Dubai Air Show. We didn't do it, but I guess the signals were there. And so join us after this very quick message from our sponsors, the World Defence Show, and we're going to find out about that. Welcome back. So John, Dubai, Rafale performing brilliantly. Nobody else was there really, were they?
No, absolutely not. It was really surprising. BAE Systems and Eurofighter GmbH together were completely absent. Now, in retrospect, perhaps they knew what was coming and therefore there was no point their being there. And certainly the Rafale appearance at Dubai was remarkable. They looked like a triumphant company. It was almost enough to make you slightly worried that they might blow everything again as they did back in 2011, because they looked like a company who'd got an order. There were models of Rafale everywhere. There was Dassault and Rafale branded posters congratulating the UAE on its 50 years. They sponsored the Air Chiefs Conference. Rafale was everywhere. Now, the reason they didn't sign at Dubai, of course, was that it's so big, they didn't just want it being the chairman of Dassault and the local industrial partnership chairman. They wanted it in the presence of Macron and in the presence of MBZ. And so they had to wait until after the Dubai show. And they've made a massive deal of it, of course, because that's exactly what it is. It doesn't necessarily derail the F-35 proposed deal. The Emiratis have always made it clear that that was additional to any fighter replacement requirement. It doesn't even necessarily mean that we won't see another big fighter deal in the UAE. These Rafales are just replacing the 53 surviving Mirage 2000s. And even there, they're not doing so for a little while yet. You know, they're waiting for the F4 standard. So it will be a little while. So
it's quite a deal for France as well, isn't it? Because there were other things wrapped into this as well. I mean, it's a mega industrial deal.
It's massive. They say that it's their biggest industrial deal ever. It's certainly the biggest Rafale export deal ever. You know, it's taken Egypt 2 bites of the cherry, as it were, to get to 54 aeroplanes. So 80 aeroplanes in one go is massive. And it's also a real validation for the French strategy. The French have really locked into the UAE. They've had a Rafale detachment there almost permanently for the last 10 years. That's a massive demonstration of commitment. The French have shown that they're a really reliable partner, regardless of whether the UAE Air Force has been bombing in Libya, regardless of whether it's been participating in the Yemen. The UAE have been able to sit there and watch the problems that their allies have had with support from certain other nations, Germany in particular, but also the US, and they've seen that they're not necessarily reliable. And France has shown itself to be reliable and absolutely steadfast. And so even if the Rafale isn't necessarily the best aeroplane to meet the requirement, it's the aeroplane that does meet the requirement in the real world. And that's why this is so significant. And this is why Eurofighter should be quaking in their bloody boots.
Great. John, thank you for that. And you mentioned just now Egypt, and Jay Menon, our correspondent in South Asia, has been to Cairo for the EDEX show. Jay, welcome. How was it? How was the show?
Thanks, Alan. It was a pretty good show, though there was hardly any COVID protocols being followed. But there was a good participation with over 400 exhibitors from all over the world displaying their latest technologies and from 42 countries.
And what was the highlight from where you saw it?
Yeah. For us, the most interesting aspect was the two South Asian rivals, India and Pakistan, vying for eyeballs and possible defense deals. So I was standing in the HAL pavilion, the Hindustan Aeronautics Limited. The buzz was all about the homegrown light combat aircraft. The officials were obviously tight-lipped, but amid the silence, there were rumors that Egyptian Air Force has shown keen interest in the aircraft, the LCA Tejas, as they are looking for a full-fledged combat aircraft that may also be used for pilot training on occasions. So the Egyptian Air Force has been sending signals of its interest in the LCA for the last couple of years. I think you also might be knowing at the Dubai Air Show, there were talks that HAL will be going to Egypt to showcase their LCA.
Jay, I'm surprised to hear you talking about TEAS because obviously the thrust of recent Egyptian procurement has been all about more complex, bigger, more expensive fighters. They've bought the Rafales, obviously, as we just mentioned. There's been the big Sukhoi 35 deal. Before that, there were the MiG-29 M2s. And of course, the big buzz before EDEX kicked off was these talks about possibly getting some Eurofighters from Italy.
This is an interesting question, but the main aspect what Egypt is looking at is the cost. I think India is offering a very low cost for the aircraft. I think that, and they have also promised to establish a manufacturing unit in Egypt in the framework of a contract, because that's what I learned from the officials there, that the cost factor.
So, Jay, you mentioned Pakistan, of course, in your first response, and they, of course, launched a UAV there.
Yeah. The Global Industrial and Defense Solution, that is GIDS, they came up with they officially unveiled the Sharpar 2 medium altitude endurance drone at the expo, and there was a lot of buzz surrounding that.
Okay, brilliant. Jay Menon reporting from New Delhi, but reporting about Cairo. Now, let's have a look as well. Missiles. You've got an interesting interview.
Yeah, we had a really good interview with Thuenis Botha, not an Emirati name, as you'll gather, a South African who's the CEO of Tariq, one of the companies in the Edge conglomerate, and they make the Tariq glide bomb. Now, that originated as a South African weapon, the Umbani. It's been developed almost out of recognition. They now have some 24 variants of the weapon, and Mr. Botha talked us through those and talked to us about plans for the weapon.
Our core business is the design and manufacturing of the Tariq, a family of long-range precision-guided munitions. So on the side here you can see it consists of at least 24 configurations, defined by payload size as well as the type of seekers to be used. This is the precision-guided munition with the longest range in its class in the world. The superior modularity allows for a great mission flexibility for the warfighter. On the Dubai Air Show 2021, we have debuted the Mark 83 or the 450 kilogram class Tariq for the first time. It's on show behind me. This is a weapon that allows the user to use a bigger bomb, 450 kilogram, either the Mark 83 or the 450 HSLD bomb that can be integrated onto the Tariq, the current range with the same front section, rear section and electronics, which allows for common logistic support. The second part of our new offering is we are integrating on a purpose-built Mark 82 penetrator, which allows the system the opportunity to be used against hardened targets. This warhead will be qualified in Q1 2022 in the UAE. The system is currently in final development, and we hope to be in production with both these systems by the mid of 2022.
Hey, and that was good. Well, of course, talking about good news as well, Eurofighter has been back in the news for the Middle East.
Yeah, in some ways a disastrous month for Eurofighter in that they've been kicked out in Finland, they've watched their bitter, deadly rivals Dassault win in the UAE, but they've had some glimmers of good news. First off, the first Qatari Typhoon has now made its first flight. BAE and Qatar made a big fuss of that, albeit with no cameras present, but we have a little exclusive clip of the aircraft landing after that first flight. More importantly, we've seen Kuwait take delivery of its first 2 Eurofighters. Now that is massive, and of course, these will briefly be the most advanced fighters in service in the world anywhere, because they have a radar with a repositioner, an ESA radar with a repositioner. So instead of just seeing a narrow cake slice in front of the aircraft where the range tapers off at the edges, these aircraft, because of the repositioner, the pilots and the radar will be able to see from over one shoulder to over the other. That means that he'll be able to break away harder and quicker in a long-range engagement, still supporting his missile in flight, making himself much less vulnerable to a return missile shot, and he may even disappear from his opponent's radar because of that 90-degree turn into what they call the Doppler notch. So that will be of massive significance tactically. So yeah, good news for Eurofighter there anyway.
And good news for the Middle East, of course. And as we're approaching 2022, it's great to see how much development there's been in the last year. And of course, going into 2022, we've got the World Defence Show in Riyadh that looks like it's going to be quite spectacular. So we look forward to talking to you about that when you join us again in January. And before then, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year from me as well. If you get too bored over the Christmas turkey and all of that, don't forget there's lots and lots of great content on our YouTube channel and on our website. So tuck into that as well. Really enjoy it. Thanks so much for watching. See you next year. Thanks again. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
How do we achieve ultimate defense interoperability? Inspired by Vision 2030, we are introducing the first of its kind, the World Defence Show. Integrating land, air, sea, satellite, and security.